Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
There are many different difficult questions that we need to answer in life, and some that are especially difficult at different times. But we'll turn to a hypothetical, one that has bedeviled the human race for, well, as long as we have records. We'll be referring back to the Code of Hammurabi, the ancient law code of the Babylonians that existed even before Torah was given. So we have a situation where there is a unfortunate catastrophe. Within a particular community, a person, we'll call him Mr. A, has killed Mr. B's daughter. And the question, of course, becomes, how can justice be done? What will we do in this tragic situation? Mr. A has taken the life of Mr. B's daughter. What will possibly set things right? The Code of Hammurabi says that it's very simple. All you need to do is take Mr. A's daughter and let Mr. B kill her. Then everything will be fair. We all understand the resolution there? Right? Mr. A killed Mr. B's daughter, therefore Mr. B gets to kill Mr. A's daughter. We now have perfect harmony and balance. It is a perfect mirror, and that, of course, is the benchmark of justice. You may notice that the sign outside said Temple Israel, not Temple Hammurabi. So obviously we disagree with this assessment. But let's try to deconstruct it a little bit first to understand what is such a problem with this idea. We are naturally revolted, and that is a good sign. That means that Torah has worked on us for 3,000 years to the point that we immediately recoil from such an idea. But this was considered perfectly reasonable for its day. This was absolutely fair in the eyes of so many people, well, thousands of years ago. But it's based on a few assumptions, many of which we probably disagree with. So assumption number one, and I apologize, Tilly, as I point to you as an example, assumption number one is that she is the property of him. That just as he owns a car, just as he owns a house, he also owns a daughter. And therefore the loss of the daughter is, well, tragic, of course, but it is also very akin to a property loss. If I were to steal his car, I owe him a car. And that means my car, if that was the only one I had, would be forfeit and would have to go to him. If I take his daughter through murder, then, well, my daughter needs to go too, because property loss has to be balanced by property loss. Obviously, we disagree with that assessment. She is not his property, although certainly she is his responsibility. Very different in the calculation, however, between responsibility and ownership. There is, of course, a second idea here, which is that justice will be performed when we have precisely duplicated the damage done to the aggrieved party to the person that perpetrated the action. That is to say that justice is done when the perpetrator suffers an equal amount as the person who has suffered. And this benchmark of fairness is something that we might be more in tune with. Indeed, most people, especially when we are very little, start off with the idea that justice is done when we've made things equal in a very identical way. You'll notice that small children will be very concerned by how many chocolate chips your cookie has compared to my cookie, and that is the benchmark of the equality, the fairness of the cookie distribution. Likewise, if someone punches you, you're going to want to punch them back. And if they punched you hard, you're going to want to punch them back hard, not gently. You want to even it out. This is a sort of root instinct that comes from that monkey part of our brain. But there is a problem with this. Because to imagine that we can create justice by recreating the precise amount of suffering that was inflicted upon the person who has inflicted that problem is also based upon the assumption that really in the end we don't actually care about doing it right, we only care about looking like we're doing it right. That is to say, justice becomes a performing art rather than an actual institute of the community, rather than an actual pillar of what it means to be a community. Let me explain why this falls apart so quickly. We'll go back to Hammurabi's code. If if Mr. A has killed Mr. B's daughter, then Mr. B's daughter needs to be killed. But how can that ever be properly rendered in an equal way? Because after all, maybe Mr. A has 10 children, and maybe Mr. B only has 1. By taking one of the 10 from Mr. A in punishment for taking Mr. B's only child, will we have inflicted a perfectly proportional amount of damage? No, of course not. One is losing 1/10 of their property, no offense. The other lost 100% of their property. It is not equivalent at all. Secondly, imagine that the death of the daughter from Mr. B was lingering, was extremely painful, was extremely difficult. Do we imagine that we can recreate precisely the sensory experience that she went through during this tragedy in order to properly punish Mr. A by recreating that for his daughter? How can we possibly set that up? And even if we could, imagining that we are now living in some future dystopia where we have the capability of hardwiring into someone's brain a precise and measured amount of pain, can we still account for the fact that the first victim had no idea that something was about to happen, at least in this scenario, whereas the punished daughter is now suffering the torment of knowing that she will be taken to the dystopian cell where they will hold her up and then throw a switch, and that is indeed not an equivalent experience to what the first victim had. We cannot create a duplicate experience if that is our benchmark for what justice has to be. And so Judaism says that isn't what justice is supposed to be. Justice is not meant to be the slacking of our thirst for revenge. Justice is not meant to be the child who wants to punch back as hard as they were punched. Justice is not meant to be performative. Justice is meant to be corrective. And corrective means it has to be balanced, it has to be proportional, it has to be fair, but it also has to be done in a way that doesn't further damage the community or create collateral damage, such as someone's innocent daughter just because her father made a huge mistake, nor does it end up doing something as destructive as imagining that justice is only tit for tat. In fact, justice removes this instrument of correction from those that feel it most acutely. It tells the family of those bereaved, you don't get to decide what happens. It is not going to be perfectly proportional to the grief that you are feeling. That we will handle this as a community as needs to be handled, but there is nothing in justice that will make you whole. The loss of your child is never going to be remedied by the loss of someone else. Perhaps, yes, an execution will be the correct course to take in a case like this. Mr. A, indeed, may have to be executed for the crime that he committed. But that is not being done to make you whole. That is not being done to make you feel better. That is being done because it is the only correct act for this particular deed. And Judaism does allow for capital punishment with a great many caveats and conditions to ensure that the trial and the case and the execution are carried out fairly and humanely. There is not meant to be additional suffering as it is carried out at all. We often have our passions inflamed when we witness great injustices, as we have witnessed time and time again over the last 500 plus days since October 7th. And as we were acutely reminded of with the return of the remains of the Vivas family and others that have been killed. But we also have to recognize that if we are going to seek justice for them, and if we are going to pursue justice for all, that we cannot allow it to be Hammurabi's code. We cannot allow it to be the monkey parts of us that are in the driver's seat. Instead, it has to be measured, it has to be fair, it has to be correct. We do not kill someone else's child because of what they did to the children of Israel. But the answer will come forthwith, and we can pray that it will be just, that it will be fair. And we can pray that through a fair and just resolution, perhaps all can be brought closer to a peaceful resolution, where such things are only in the history books, For ultimately, that is what justice should lead us towards. Shabbat Shalom.